This is part number 8 of our teaching that we're doing on Yahuwah Rapha, our healer, and we're going to finish up tonight in our study on the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, where we've been talking about Jairus and also the woman with the issue of blood. And if you haven't listened to the other sessions, I encourage you to go back and listen to the ones that I've done. You'll find them on YouTube. That's at Proclaiming Yahuwah. Is our YouTube channel, and if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, I encourage you to do so, and share that with others, because we want others to know of where they can go and receive teaching and preaching about Yahuwah's name and other aspects of the gospel or the Besorah that they need to hear. So, but we've been talking about the Jairus and how in the 5th chapter of Mark, actually starting at verse 22, and I'm not going to read all these verses because we did all that before, but he came to Yahusha and said, "My daughter is at the point of death." In other words, she's on the verge of dying. But he said, "If you'll come and lay your hands on her, she'll be healed and she shall live." Well, immediately, because of Jairus' faith, you notice how faith moves our Creator. Faith, when we put faith in His Word, faith pleases Him, as Hebrews chapter 11 verse 6 says. Without faith, it's impossible to please Him. See, we have to believe what He said. This is what pleases Yahuwah. When we believe and put our faith and trust in His Word. And so Yahusha starts on his way to do what Jairus has asked of him. And on the way there was a woman with the issue of blood who had spent all she had not gotten any better. In other words, she had sought all the medical doctors, and they couldn't help her. And she started getting actually worse instead of better. Well, it says that she heard of Yahusha. Well, what did she hear? She had to hear something. First of all, she had to come to the conclusion that it was Yahusha's will, or Yahuwah's will, to heal her. And I've shared with you on our previous teachings that you've got to be convinced beyond any doubt whatsoever that it's not only that Yahuwah can heal. That's, faith isn't that Yahuwah can, but faith is Yahuwah will, and that He'll do it for you. See, that's where really faith is all about. It's not necessarily that you believe, because everybody, not everybody, but most people, even non-believers, if you were to ask them, you could say, can our Creator heal? Of course, they would probably say yes. But see, that's not going to get them healed. Just because you believe that Yahuwah can heal you, you've got to know that He will heal you. That's where faith begins, is when you know that Yahuwah will heal you. So you've got to get to that point. If you're not there yet, then the only way to get there is to find out what the Word has to say. Not what I say, but what the Word has to say. This is a revelation of the will of Yahuwah. And we find that because He gave us His name, Yahuwah Rapha, He's telling us what His will is. I am Yahuwah, your healer. He wants you well. He wants you healed. So the woman with the issue of blood, after she found out that Yahuwah's will was for her to be healed, she said, if I just touch the hem of Yahusha's garment, because she recognized this is the Mashiach, this is the Messiah, and if I just touch the hem of His garment, I'm going to be whole. Well, without reading these verses, exactly what she said came to pass. She touched the hem of His garment. She felt on her body that she was healed of her plague. And Yahusha, knowing immediately that virtue had gone out of him, turned about and said, "Who touched me?" And then she began to tell him everything. And he told her, "Woman, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace," or go shalom, is what he said, shalom, "and be whole of your plague." He told her that it was her faith that made her whole. Now, then we get to the part where Jairus, about that time this is happening, somebody comes down and tells Jairus that his daughter's already died. There's no sense in bothering the Mashiach anymore. She's already dead. And as soon as Yahusha heard those words, he looked and spoke to Jairus and said, "Be not afraid, only believe." And I share with you, fear is what Satan or Shaitan uses to try to rob and steal from us. And the scripture declares that Yahuwah has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and of a sound mind. And Yahusha told Jairus, "Fear not." In other words, resist fear. That's something that you ought to put into practice about everything in your life. When fear tries to come upon you in any area of your life, resist it. Because it's like resisting Shaitan when he comes at you with fear. Because if your faith is based on the Word, I don't care what it is, if you know Yahuwah Rapha is your healer, then you won't fear sickness and disease coming upon your body and taking your life. You'll meditate and think about the fact that He is my provider. He's my healer. I will not fear what man shall do unto me. When circumstances come against you that threaten your life, you'll know that it says in Psalm 91 that he that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I'll say of Yahuwah, He is my refuge. He's my fortress. In Him do I trust. There shall no evil befall me, neither shall any plague come near my dwelling, for He has given His malaks, His angels, charge over me, to keep me and to protect me in all my ways. I'll say of Yahuwah. See, we have to say something. We have to declare something. We have to speak our faith. And Yahusha told Jairus not to fear, but only believe. Only believe what? Only believe what Jairus had spoken back in verse 23. If you go back Mark 5:23, read what Jairus said. He said, "If you'll come and lay hands on her, she shall be healed and she shall live." Well, in the process, she dies before he gets there. But did that, Yahusha told him, only believe, and what he's making reference to is what he had already spoken. Even though in the natural it looked hopeless because she had already died, according to this person that came down and told them that. But you got to understand who we're talking about. Yahusha, he said when he raised Lazarus from the dead, he said, "I am the resurrection and the life." He's one that gives all life in the first place. Oh, this is so wonderful when you can see this and what we're talking about here. Even at the look of the finality of physical death, Yahusha says, "Fear not, only believe." Why? Because He is the resurrection and the life. Because He knows what He's going to do. Let's read the rest of this so we can finish this up. He said, "Be not afraid," verse 36, "Be not afraid, only believe." And He allowed no one to follow them except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And He came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw the tumult and them that wept and wailed. In other words, they were in distress. They were crying. They were weeping. And when He came in, He said, "Why are you weeping? Why are you making all this fuss? The damsel's not dead, but but sleeps." See, Yahusha is declaring, he's declaring his own faith. He's saying she's just asleep. She's not dead. And they laughed Him to scorn. In other words, they thought He was silly. But He took the father and the mother of the damsel and them that were with Him and entered in where she was lying. Notice He took the father and mother because they're the one that has authority over this daughter. He brought them in there. And He took the damsel by the hand and said unto her, "Talitha cumi," which is being interpreted, damsel, I say unto you, arise. And straightway the damsel or the girl arose and walked, for she was of the age of 12 years. In other words, she's 12 years old. And they were astonished with great astonishment. I guess so. She had died, but she came back to life. And he charged them straitly that no man should know it, and commanded that something should be given her to eat. He didn't. The reason he commanded not to expound on this, because his fame was just growing and growing, and people were, by the multitudes, were coming to him. And he also had a time that he knew that he was going to be turned over for his crucifixion. So there's certain things that he wanted to take place at a certain time. So that's why he commanded them not to tell it. It was getting too well, his fame was getting too well known of what was going on. That's the reason for that. But anyway, we're going to finish up here. This is the last part. We'll be teaching on Mark chapter 5, and we'll start into some new verses that we're going to get into in talking about divine healing. But I wanted you to see how important these two individuals, Jairus and the woman with the issue of blood, both of them, their faith had something to do with them receiving their healing or their miracles. And I want to encourage you to understand, first of all, that it's Yahuwah's will that you be made whole, that you be healed. You've got to establish that in your heart, 100%, absolutely convinced that Yahuwah wants you well. The rest of it, you're on your journey. If you'll get on that path right there, because if you don't get on that path, if you still in doubt, still not sure, then you're not ready to receive your healing yet. But if you'll just stay on the Word, continue to feed yourself on the Word, because this is a revelation of the will of Yahuwah. And when you get to understand, just like we've already covered, that He's Yahuwah that forgives all your iniquities, and He's the same Yahuwah that will heal all your diseases. But it takes you believing that, it takes you putting faith in that and acting upon that before you can receive the benefits of His blessing. Well, thank you for our time together. I love you. Yahuwah loves you. I want to see you well. He wants to see you well. You know, a lot of people that may be having sickness and disease in their body. They may be looking and trying to find out. You know, see, a lot of people would tell you, well, Yahuwah will heal you if it's His will. Well, I know it's His will, and we've already shared with you enough scriptures, hopefully, that you're convinced as well. But don't listen to the people who tell you all this stuff unless they give you chapter and verse, unless they can prove through the scriptures what the will of Yahuwah is. And that's what's so important, is to know that you know what the will of Yahuwah is, and you're convinced. And once you are, then you're on the road of receiving your healing. Because if you understand how to release your faith, that's the only thing that's really stopping you from receiving at that point. Because once you know His will, then you just got to understand how to release your faith in His Word, because the rest of it is His part that He plays. If we act in faith, the Scriptures declares that Yahuwah watches over His Word to perform it. In other words, He's looking to those on the earth who will have faith in His Word and act upon His Word. And if you will, He's there to perform it. Yahuwah is not a man that He should lie. He can't lie. It's impossible for Yahuwah to lie. He can't do it. So when He tells us, you know, that He's our healer, He's that if we meditate upon, as we've already covered in Proverbs chapter 4, verses 20 through 22, that if we would attend to His words, incline our ears unto His sayings, if we don't let them depart from our eyes, that we keep them in the midst of our heart. The word that we've meditated upon, thought about, put before our eyes, that word would be medicine to our flesh. In other words, it would be what we would need in order to become whole or be healed. We'll see you next time. Shalom.